Okay, we're live. This is the conference committee for H.141, the fiscal year 25 Budget Adjustment Act. We're here in the House and Senate conferees. It's February 28th, I think. And we are going to go over when we left, we had all the differences between the two bodies figured out, except a Senate counter proposal about I don't know what we're calling that, but basically the money at on the bottom line and the effective dates. So we will address that. And then we have a presentation or a proposal, possibly add to the conference report from the administration. The Secretary of Administration will present that. But first, wanted to hear what the House thought of our counter proposal.
So we conferred and understand that this is another way to ensure that we have the money that we need for the following year. And so we will agree with your proposal to transfer the 133.7 million to the other infrastructure, essential investments and reserves fund as proposed by the Senate.
Thank you for reviewing that. So that has us in agreement with all sections except the effective dates. As far as what we agreed is the H.141 has passed by the House and Senate. We will see if we want to make any other changes. So at this point, if the Secretary of Administration wants to come up and present the idea about the GA program, that would be great. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. For the record, I'm Sarah Clark. I'm the Secretary of Administration. Thank you for having me in this morning. And I just want to say, such a crazy world to be sitting here with all of you in this capacity, but I'm really honored to do so. So before we talk about our compromise proposal related to the GA emergency assistance hotel motel program, I want to just talk a little bit about the letter that I submitted to the conference committee with our concerns about the budget adjustment as it came out of the Senate, which I'll be brief because I know that you're familiar with our concerns. But the budget adjustment the governor submitted to the legislature is what I would refer to as kind of a clean budget adjustment bill, and that we made the mandatory mid-year adjustments that were critical in areas where we were experiencing cost pressures, utilization adjustments, deficit mitigation, designed really to be policy light so that we could quickly move forward and pass a budget adjustment. We're concerned about some of the additional spending that's been added in both the House and Senate versions of the budget adjustment, and request that those discussions and policy items be shifted into the FY26 big bill conversation. In addition, you're aware of our concern related to what I'll refer to as the year-end construct, which I think you just agreed to. And I'll full transparency, we haven't had a chance to evaluate the proposal that you just agreed to. And so we'll do that. And if we have additional follow-up, we can share that with you, but understanding you just agreed to that construct. I think the version that we had supported carried forward the funds, but also set aside for priorities such as property tax, stabilization, housing, or other important areas to leave it high level, but also signal that we know we have some additional issues we're going to have to address collectively next year. So with that, let me present to you the compromise proposal that we're putting on the table as it relates to the hotel motel program. So it's really important to myself and to the administration that we maintain the program that we agreed to last year. That program included the cold weather exception ending on March 31st. But I want to make sure, and I know everyone here understands, but that doesn't mean that the entire GA emergency housing program ends. I'm just talking about the cold weather portion of the program and those parameters. The end date of March 31st is consistent with historical practice. And again, the program outside of the cold weather program continues to run, and it all resets on July 1st, as you are aware. What we are proposing as a compromise, instead of the $1.8 million that's been allocated to maintain the hotel motel program for the individuals that are in there now for the cold weather through June 30th, we are proposing instead an amount, perhaps roughly $2.1 million, that would allow us to end the cold weather program as agreed upon on March 31st. But we would use those funds to issue grants to municipalities to provide support to them as individuals exit the cold weather hotel motel program. The funds would be allocated based on hotel rooms used per the AHS district office structure. There are 12 district offices, and within each office, we have data in terms of how many hotel rooms are currently being used for that program. And so we would make allocation decisions in terms of the amount to those municipalities based on that data. We would also propose to set a minimum amount of grant of $50,000. There are 3 communities where per the allocation, the funds would be less than 50. And we wanted to make sure that we were issuing funds that would be sufficient to give those communities options and allow them to make the most appropriate decisions for the residents that they deem would be most beneficial. And so maximum flexibility means that they really have the ability to make that decision. So it could include, though not part of the state's program, it could include allowing those households to stay in hotels and motels, and the municipalities can pay for those rooms. It could include partnering with a nonprofit organization within their community to perhaps stand up more shelters or provide guidance and advice on the best path forward. It could allow for relocation funding for households if perhaps that's what's needed to get them to a more permanent solution. Really is not trying to predetermine to municipalities what that decision could be, but allow them the flexibility to do that. We also believe the way that the district offices are structured, for example, Barry is a district office, but the towns that feed into that are more expansive than Barry, and that Barry should be working with the communities in its surrounding areas within the district office jurisdiction to make sure that they are presenting the best alternative for the broader community. So that's the compromise that we're offering to you today. I want to also indicate that that proposal to get us through these 3 months until July 1st, when our General Assistance Emergency Housing Program resets and continues for the parameters we developed together last year, that the state is continuing to work on expanding our emergency shelter capacity. So this includes keeping the shelters open in Williston and Waterbury that we stood up, I think it was in late November, December timeframe, as well as continuing to develop options to provide that additional capacity, emergency shelter capacity, as we move forward with the program as approved last year. That's our proposal.
Are you willing to take questions?
Sure, of course.
Any questions over there to start with?
I'm sure we do.
I'm sure you do.
So, and thank you for coming, Sarah. I am concerned about the timeline of getting this done and stood up in basically less than a month by the time this thing would get approved and signed, maybe 3 weeks. So if you want to talk about that, and another concern I have is, how do the towns feel about this? The cities and towns, have you been in touch with them? So those are my first 2 questions. I'll let others ask.
Sure, I can address those. And I should have said, I have my colleague, Monica Hutt, who is the Chief Prevention Officer. I just may phone a friend if there's some more detailed questions about our housing, but I can address those two questions as well. So timing is tight. I feel that timing is always tight. And if this is a proposal that we can move forward together, I think that the state would be willing to work with communities to facilitate any sort of road bumps may arise as we fully flesh out what this would look like. And try to ease administrative burden for communities to the extent that we're able to. I should have also said, as part of these grant dollars, they would be allowed to use it for administrative support as needed. It is short turnaround, but I think we can do what we can, working with you to help facilitate it, as well as do whatever we can. If we reached agreement today, for example, I know that there's a desire to wrap up the conference report today. If we were to reach agreement today, we could immediately begin working on starting to put together those agreements with the communities, so that by the time budget adjustment, let's say, became law, that we would be able to expedite those agreements.
And then have you talked to the communities and how do they feel about this? It seems like a burden on the community.
Yeah, we have not had conversations with communities in the context of this specific proposal. We were really wanting to put it on the table. We've been working on its development over the last 36 hours, wanting to put it on the table with you as a potential compromise. But if it wasn't something you were interested in, you didn't want to do the outreach ahead of time. But certainly, if we come to agreement today, I know next week is town meeting break. We will be, here working and would start having that level of engagement with communities and answering questions and maybe navigating some of the operational issues that we would have to.
On your point about March 31st being the agreed end of the winter rules in the FY25 budget, that was definitely at least my intent in agreeing with that last year. However, things changed when folks had to be exited from the hotels in September, I think. So that's why I feel like it's appropriate to reopen that, because after the 80 days from July 1st, as folks were exited in September, things that we thought were going to be in place by then to ease that transition didn't get in place. And the discretion that we thought that the commissioner had, so that folks that were in a wheelchair and on oxygen or with an infant child would not be exited under the discretion of the commissioner, since we had a disagreement about that. Not wanting to see what happened in September happen in April, I think that, at least on the Senate position, was we didn't want to see that again. And that's why we wanted to have the winter rules extended so we have more time to figure out a better system. So that's just why we are looking to change from what we agreed on last year. But I think, as the chair of the House Appropriation just said, we're really concerned about the onus that this would put on the towns and how we would do this. I also wondered if you've thought about how the 80 days would be tracked. It seems like if they're staying on the town's dollar, then they're not, but some of them might be still on the Senate dollar, and they might come on the state program. It just seems like it might be difficult about when their 80 days are counted and when they're not. Or is that just another one of the administrative things you'd have to work out?
In my mind, if the household is exiting the state's program, and let's say the community chose to, with their funds, continue paying for the hotel motel stay for them, that would be separate from the state program. And so it would not be subject to that 80-day cap, because it would be completely separate. And those households, assuming that they met the criteria on July 1st, could come back into the state's general assistance emergency housing program on July 1st.
Good question.
Well, thanks for coming with this. I appreciate that. And I think that I have practical concerns and I have kind of overarching philosophical concerns. I mean, the plan seems to send a message to communities that this is your problem. And our communities have been shouldering the burden of trying to find shelter for folks and respond to their needs for years now. And they're my heroes because they keep saying yes. But there comes a breaking point. And, the idea to give communities the resources to actually meet the needs of those in their communities is, I think, kind of, it's animating H91. But that bill anticipates a runway. It can't happen overnight, which brings me to the practical. If I were to go, I talked with my mayor yesterday. I've talked with service providers in my community, probably almost every week. They will try, but they cannot manage this additional administrative burden, especially in the amount of time that we have. So I guess I'm just, conceptually, I do think our communities are probably better equipped to respond to needs, but we have made promises as a state many, 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 many times that we would base services in communities and haven't done so. Think about closing Brandon and the challenges now around disability housing. I guess it's our problem, and I feel that we need to see this through. And the context in which we drafted the budget last year and passed it was really different. We didn't know about, the surpluses that we would be carrying. So at any rate, I guess I'm not really asking a question, am I? I'm just saying something. But yeah, these are my concerns, and I appreciate that you're willing to work with us. But those are my concerns.
If I may respond, and I don't want to diminish the workload and demands on our communities and municipalities, and how in many cases they've really stepped up as a partner with the state in many areas, right? And this is one, but there's also, when you look at the floods over the last 2 years and what our communities have done in partnership with the state, it really is incredible. And I have great respect for that work. And I want to be clear in this proposal that this is a pathway for this 3 months and providing some financial support to communities and municipalities. But the state is still running our general assistance emergency housing program. It's just the winter conditions program would end on March 31st. And the state is still working to stand up shelter capacity. It is not a complete solution, but it is a solution that we do continue to work on. There's not a day, I think, that Monica Hutt and I don't have conversations with the Agency of Human Services in terms of the projects on the emergency sheltering that we're continuing to stand up. So I think your point, Representative Bloomley, about it, in my mind, it really is this partnership, the state, both the executive and legislative branches, as well as working with our communities, municipalities, community providers, all working together for Vermonters. We are concerned that the outcomes in the hotel motel program are not good for the residents that are in them, and that we see better outcomes in the shelter programs that we have stood up in partnership with community providers, but the ones that the state has stood up as well. And so that's why we're presenting what we are today.
And in the meantime, we don't have enough shelter capacity. And there will be 466 children that would not be housed if the numbers hold up from what they are today. And so I find that very troubling. I don't know how many vets there are in this number either. I've heard a few dozen, maybe more. And so I think we would probably all agree that the hotel motel program is not the desired end game, and we'd like to find something else. And shelters can be a much more dignified and supportive way to get people there. But there's a long time between here and there. And there isn't enough time by April to get the numbers that we need set up. And I worry also that, we're giving this, communities have to stand something up really fast. Then they're responsible for the people that they're now trying to house. And what happens if something happens to one of their clients? And for those folks themselves, now I talk to the town, and then next week I talk to the state, because now it's July and I'm not sure who I'm doing. So it feels like we're adding to confusion on top of everything else. So it's a few more thoughts.
Senator Lyons has a question.
Thank you. First, thank you for bringing this to us. And I know that the House Human Services is also very much engaged in this discussion, moving in a direction that will help going forward. And last year, when we negotiated the agreement with the 80 days and so on, we thought we will solve this problem early on and we won't have to take it up again. We've been engaged. I know Representative Squirrel and I have been very much engaged in the rulemaking process. It's a difficult process, and we appreciate the work that I do appreciate the work the administration is doing and continues to do to, I guess, lower the boom on the hotel motel program. It is temporary. It should be temporary. The concerns we have now, it's just like the BAA that we have before us were deals that were made last year in the budget process, and now we're making changes there. They're new appropriations or changes in appropriations. We see a need for moving money around in a new way. I don't see this, a change that we've made for the dates any differently. I see it just as moving the money so that families who have kids in school don't have to move in the middle of the school year. So that's the overarching concern. My question really is twofold. I have two comments, comments. And you've talked about the administration of this through the municipalities and the field offices. And the field office is ready for this, one. And two, I think we've already asked, are municipalities ready for this? If they're not, it'll take a few select board votes and some planning commission work, maybe, I don't know. But just knowing how the infrastructure at the local level works, it could be challenging given the time. So I think the intent that's here, and it's good, trying to work together is always our goal. So I'm asking you about the administration, about how many towns have already said we're ready to go. That's it.
Okay, I should clarify, the district offices would not be involved in it.
You did mention those, that's why I asked.
Yeah, and yes, thank you for asking, because I wouldn't have wanted you to think that. I mean, I think the state will be here to facilitate this transition to towns, but the district office construct is what we are proposing to use for allocation. And so we have 12 district offices. And I could run through that list, provide you that list of what they are. But it's using for allocation. It would be the municipalities that would be receiving the funds. And as I said earlier, we have not had conversations with them yet. If this is something that we can move forward on together, we will work next week during town meeting break to start having those conversations about what this would look like. And it really is designed to give maximum flexibility, which we are proposing it as a benefit, but I hear you in terms of the administrative costs and having to navigate the decision-making. But it would allow them, if they chose, to pay for the hotels and motels of the families that are currently residing there, that are going to be exiting our program through the parameters from what we approved last year.
So, oh yeah, Representative Squirrel, go ahead.
Just a comment, I guess, or a couple comments. Thank you for being here and delivering this proposal from the administration. And my colleagues and I all agree that this is the kind of program that we want, and we haven't got to a place where we need to be. I guess I failed to see how the new proposal from the administration really is getting us any further along than what the House and the Senate have proposed in the BAA. It's going to cost more money. I think we're introducing a number of moving parts that create, in my mind, in my view, an unacceptable level of risk. And I just can't fathom how all these municipalities are going to have the capacity to do this. My comment.
Do you have a question, Senator Bryant?
Just have just a couple of questions, make sure I understand how the 80-day rule would apply. In this case, there are certain people are housed in motels right now who would probably hit the 80-day mark before the end of this alternative proposal is reached. And those people under the alternative proposal would be able to stay where they are because they are not using the state funds that we've set up. On the other hand, if the program is continued as proposed here in the things that we're looking at in the Conference Committee report, they would exit the program and have to leave. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that is correct. If I'm understanding your question correctly. And in this proposal for the households that have to exit, since it would no longer be part of the state program, they would not be subject to the 80-day cap if the municipality chose to maintain their housing in the hotels and hotels.
And at this point, based on the way you propose this, if 100% of municipalities decided they wanted to continue with the motel program as is, they'd be able to do so?
Yes, that is our understanding. We aligned the dollars to what was included in your budget adjustment proposal. But the reason that we increased the amount is that we wanted to provide the minimum of $50,000 grants for some of those communities that have smaller households, but also to make sure that there was the ability to provide some amount of administrative support to the municipalities. That's why it's a little bit more than what you have proposed.
My understanding also, if I've heard this correctly, is that if every municipality decided to continue keeping the people who are in motels, they could do so, one. And two, the administration would provide the administrative support to make that happen with your existing relationships.
I think one of the things we would want to discuss next week is what that could look like in terms of a transition from you're in this program now, in the state program now in a hotel room. And if Barry, for example, wanted to maintain that housing structure, what that handoff could look like. And those are some of the things that we would discuss.
Now, what I've heard is that you have not had sufficient time to have discussions with the municipalities as to what the effect would be, and they're willing to participate, but that you would do so next week, the week that the legislature is not in session because of town meeting. And would you be able, if you had the time to do that, in other words, we acted on Monday the 10th rather than today, you'd be able to report to this conference committee the results of those conversations and provide additional detail as to how this would work?
Correct.
And then at that point, the conference committee could then take its vote based on what you proposed, what's been proposed in the conference committee report, but on the basis of additional information.
Correct.
Yes, another question.
I did think another question. If this got transferred to the municipalities, would they therefore have the liability if something happened to somebody in a hotel or motel room or a shelter?
So I think, and I think that's one of the questions I would want to get back to you on. I think there's a lot of little details that if we were to talk about this for longer, that we would want to be able to work our way through. to be honest with you, I'm not sure how it works now in terms of the
No.
state and our relationship with the hotel and motel owners. I think
that I could see
Would
that
wanna
being a
understand.
real deal breaker,
Yeah.
that the community doesn't have the insurance and they don't want to take on that additional risk and liability. For,
if you're paying, and I don't want to.
I don't know what the answer is, but that's worrisome.
Hotel room, so, okay, yeah.
So I did have some questions. Senator Lyons has to go vote on a important bill in her committee, so she'll go vote and come back perhaps. But just to clarify some of these points, because one of the points you made at the beginning about your letter is that, the additional money and work that we're putting in the BA, but I see this as a bigger policy change than kind of changing the dates or some of the other things that we did. So I think this is a pretty big thing to add to the BAs as a comment. But there's also the administration, I think in one of your comments was like the support that lacks in the hotel rooms. This proposal doesn't provide any other support for these people either. So it doesn't solve that problem, right?
It doesn't, but again, it's a short-term compromise proposal.
Right. There's no money savings. In fact, it's going to cost more money than we had to just keep them in the hotel rooms. And I think it's going to add a lot of extra work and worry and confusion. We could get some more answers, to Senator Brock's point, like if we had more time, but the more time we spend, the closer we get to April 1st, the more angst that is for those living in the hotel rooms, also for the towns, because they're like, are we going to have to deal with these people on the streets? Or are we going to have to set up a new agreement? How's that all going to work? How are the providers going to involve? So I think it's going to cause just a lot of worry and twirl and concern and people raising a whole bunch of questions that we will have less and less time to answer. But I think overall, I like the idea if it was additive. So I don't know if the administration has given thought to doing this regardless. Like even if we extend the rules, is this something that the administration would do to support towns? Because what I've heard from my towns in this discussion was like, we need money for, service people that, staff to do this work on an ongoing basis with the homeless population coming in and out of the hotels, working with the hotel owners. So for me, it's not an either or, but a, and kind of thing. So is the administration or at least I guess I could ask, would the administration be willing to look at this way to support towns with this problem? Even if we continue to extend the adverse weather rules?
I think as we talk about state fiscal year 26 and Representative Bloomley mentioned that's H91, and I know there are conversations happening about what the GA emergency housing program will look like next year. I think supports to communities might be part of that conversation that we'd be open to having. But I think as it relates to this budget adjustment proposal, we will not support extending the winter conditions to June 30th. We are offering a compromise proposal to provide some supports to municipalities and households as they exit that program on March 31st.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And I know it's not a regular practice of the conference committee to hear any other testimony, but I thought given this proposal and the impact that it would have in the towns, that we hear really briefly from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns on what that impact would be, just on first knowing that all the details aren't there. So I'm going to invite the league to come up and just give the first cut reaction.
I'm gonna open this and it's gonna be really loud. For the record, my name is Samantha Sheehan. I'm the Municipal Policy and Advocacy Specialist for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. I am really happy to have the opportunity to share some of our immediate concerns with this proposal as I understand it this morning. So VLCT, it represents all 247 municipalities statewide. Certainly, we represent those who currently host motels that are engaged in the GA motel program. We host every municipality that is providing shelter in partnership with OEO through the Agency of Human Services. And we certainly work to care for our more than 4,000 constituents who are living in homelessness as well. So the challenges that local leaders face in the response to the homelessness crisis is different depending on the size and resources of the community and their involvement in the GA program locally. But the impacts are incredible and have been for years. In our work to advocate in this area, VLCT has never wavered from the position that the delivery of human services, and in particular shelter for vulnerable Vermonters, is in the responsibility and the authority of state government, not municipal government. Some time ago, the legislature and state government as a whole made that decision to remove those resources and authorities from local government and to take over the administration of human services. And that is how it is now. We are not open to reconsidering that on the fly today. So I'll start there. So per this proposal, as I understand it, there are some major concerns and impracticalities. The first is the timing. Your walkthrough was really helpful, Senator Brock. I think that the earliest the BAA could become law would be around March 19th. I understand these first exits would start on April 1st. It's not legal to warn a special meeting or to even accept these funds, and certainly not possible to receive community input in that period of time through the mechanisms of municipal government during any week of the year. Certainly not the week preceding town meeting day when new legislative bodies are being seated and sworn in. And new mayors potentially, hopefully not. But this is the week that Vermonters will show up and cast their vote for town offices, all town offices. So the timing is impractical and a serious concern, sort of regardless of the proposal. Municipalities do not have the resources on hand to administer the variety of programs that we heard suggested. The insurance is a real question. But also hearing that the district offices would not be involved. I don't know how even through conversation, a municipal entity with or without a nonprofit service provider could acquire the case management of these households without the participation of the district office. So even if a municipality were able to come to a decision, accept the funds, establish a program, create a motel pool to continue the shelter, or create a new shelter, how will we know who the shelter's for without the participation of the state employees who hold that information through the current GA program? Another detail that was alarming is the idea that a municipality, that an individual municipal government would administer services regionally through the district model. Is inappropriate for a municipal government to accept state funds, provide services on behalf of the state within the boundaries of another municipal government. Many of the communities that may somehow be able to muster the resources to escalate the type of response to homelessness that they have already been providing, don't have a motel in their community. So would they be administering motel shelter in another town government? Is a question. So if the state would like to or desires to reconsider its responsibilities and authorities related to providing emergency shelter or human services broadly, and if part of that conversation is considerations of expanded authorities for municipal government in providing these services to Vermonters, then that is a conversation where municipalities and local leaders have to be at the table. We do not feel it's appropriate for this to be proposed in conference committee for a budget adjustment halfway through a fiscal year. It is quite an ask for local leaders to somehow sort of navigate that policy consideration in a thoughtful way. I want to, we have provided testimony to Human Services, high-level testimony on the sort of potential future revisions to the state's GA emergency shelter program. And I'd like to quickly repeat a few of those thoughts here. Because I think they're relevant as we consider what happens to the particular households who are being sheltered now, including, as Senator Lyons said, I think it was her that said over 400 children. Oh, sorry, you said, okay, thank you. Thank you, Representative Shai. It is unprecedented that in the state of Vermont, we have to muster a response to unsheltered children. That has not happened before. And our local systems, our nonprofit service providers, our designated agencies, our municipal governments, our school districts are not equipped to respond to the safe, equitable shelter of children. We could work with the state to create those tools and resources that are most appropriate for those households in the future, but that doesn't exist right now. So while there is a sort of diversity in approach to shelter at the local level, depending on the needs and resources of each community, local leaders are generally in agreement that households with children need to be prioritized and they need to stay in the districts where they are currently receiving other services and support. Sorry, I took a little bit of chaotic notes during
Well,
the
and
prior conversation, but maybe
I don't want to go too far into the overall problem. I
Yep.
just wanted to get your impression of the proposal that was submitted,
Yeah,
which I think you've done well,
okay.
unless you had any other key points you wanted to mention about that.
One key point is we're engaged as an organization in many committees throughout the building about various ideas for better intergovernmental coordination and intermunicipal and regionalized service delivery. Currently, the state seriously limits the ability for intermunicipal agreements. So in this specific proposal, it creates a practical impossibility in sort of several ways of how more than one municipal government would work together to provide such a high liability program in sort of any amount of time. That would have to be worked through in other areas of Title 24. And I guess I would just lastly say that this is something that our municipal officials have cared deeply about, have worked really hard to address in in a thoughtful and humane way. They've been working under very urgent and difficult conditions. And I was only able to speak to a few local leaders this morning before coming to speak with you. But they were not favorable to this proposal. They are and continue to be willing partners to the state in tackling the broader housing and homelessness crisis. And we really hope to be able to do good work together on that this session. But this proposal is not something that we can support.
Thank you for quickly being able to testify.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much.
I don't know. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, can't support the administration's proposal, although I support that or appreciate that they tried to come forward with a compromise proposal and in that spirit, but it not providing any more services and not saving any money and creating a lot of problems that we just heard from the league as far how the cities would have to do this. I see it really causing more problems than it's solving by quite a bit and costing more money. That said, I still think it's a good idea to support the towns in this way. So, you know, if there's a way going forward to provide these kind of grants to these towns that are struggling under this work and maybe in a ways to foster more collaboration with the state, I would support that. I think it's in that regard, it's something that I can support. So did hear briefly from Senator Lyons before she left that she also could not support this proposal.
Thank you. I think we're probably in strong agreement with you. I appreciate the idea, and I think that it has merit for down the road, but to try to execute something like this is going to be hard on the people who need shelter and on our communities, municipalities. And there's just too much more work that needs to be done, and it's unrealistic to have it be done well and humanely by April 1st.
And I appreciate your point, Senator Brock, about like spending some more time to figure it out. But I think it just would make it that much more difficult to establish by April 1st. And so I don't think it's realistic if we just don't like the idea from now, it's just going to be that much more difficult, even if there's something figured out. So I think that's not something that we could really, at least that I could support.
Well, I understand the position of the majority of the conference committee and certainly go forward with that. I do say, though, that I see the gap between the legislature, conference committee, and the administration on this. I don't know how this will come out, but I think all of us should think about the issue of what happens in the event there is a veto of this particular bill that comes back to the legislature and the veto is sustained. Then what? Yes. My sense is that then what will be back to this proposal that gets fleshed out, perhaps in a slightly different way, perhaps addressing some of the issues that have been raised by the leagues, such as insurance and multi-entity participation in solving this problem. But I see, not absolutely with any guarantee or any promise, that we're going to be back here again sooner rather than later to solve it. It's a pity that we can't come to agreement to do it now.
The point well taken, and I think some of that work could happen if the bill is vetoed, and we will hope that it's not, but have to deal with that when that time comes. So not seeing a move on either side to add this to the bill. We're in agreement with the bill, except for the effective dates, which for fiscal would kind of change or just clarify what those are. So does joint fiscal need how much time to provide us a copy that we would be able to sign?
We need to vote. We need to vote to at some point.
My understanding is we don't vote, we just sign or not sign the document. Is the way I've done it before.
Yeah, I think you vote to approve it and then sign it. Those.
We have to vote, don't we? Does somebody know here? Vote, right?
We can vote. I guess it's kind of,
Yeah, and so if you give us 5 minutes, we can get you a copy of the bill, get you a copy of the spreadsheet that sort of shows where all the numbers are. I can walk through that really quick. You can take a break and look at all of it and then pick a time to come back to sign.
okay, so
So you would walk through the spreadsheet with us live, okay.
2 minutes.
Should Emily go do that while we vote?
yeah,
The bill first.
Oh, before we vote?
Yeah, I would say, let's give you a copy.
That's a good idea. Okay.
Look at the bill and then.
Okay, so we should go off live for a couple minutes.
we'll
Okay,
adjourn the meeting. We'll come back. You'll make a motion that we vote.
yeah.
We'll
Back at what, 11:45?
No, there's a
noon.
rules. I have a rules committee meeting scheduled at 11:45. It would be helpful if we could do it at 12.
Then we need to be in a different room.
Do we have to do it in a different room?
11:55.
Maybe there's a tax workshop here at noon. So do we want to meet in your room or our room, or what would you like to do?
We can meet in our room.
Okay, so we'll meet
You and Senator
Senator
Probst.
Probst
We'll
at
get you
noon.
copies of stuff to look at.
We're not thinking it would take very long because Senator Brock has a ethics committee meeting at
Yes,
2.
very quick. We'll get you copies right now of everything. You can look at it. I can do a 2-minute walkthrough.
Okay.
You do need to vote and then sign.
Yeah, okay.
It's not just sign.
Yeah, I thought we had to vote.
Okay.
So we'll adjourn till noon.